The restraints bit into her wrists, too tight to be coincidence. Arya Vale lifted her head, slow and deliberate, as if even in this final moment she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of haste. The cold steel platform beneath her knees hummed with quiet energy, and the floodlights painted her armor in harsh white, a beacon to billions watching across the stars. She didn't blink. Not when the warden read out the sentence, not when the crowd in the studio remained chillingly silent, and certainly not when the branding torch flared to life behind her. Her eyes stayed on the primary lens, 1,000 meters away and impossibly close, because she knew that beyond that cold black eye were the worlds still free, the colonies still fighting, and the hearts still burning. They had taken her weapons. They had taken her ship, her squad, her rank, her voice. And now they meant to take her life. But they would never take her image. Arya bore the scars of command. A thin slash traced her cheekbone, an old plasma burn from the siege of Melkor Prime. Her dark hair, once braided with regimental cord, now hung loose, matted with blood and sweat. Her white armor, scuffed and dirted, still carried her insignia. The medals pinned to her chest hadn't been removed. Perhaps the Empire wanted a spectacle. Perhaps they wanted the people to see the hero fall with all her honors intact, so no myth could rise in her place. From the observation tier, Lord Marshal Rothan watched through his visor, arms crossed. His voice crackled over the intercom, reverberating through the chamber. Arya Vale, you are found guilty of high treason, inciting insurrection, and destruction of imperial property on over 30 sanctioned worlds. How do you plead? A flicker, nothing more. I plead that you're afraid. The silence afterward was its own form of violence. Somewhere behind her, a technician stifled a breath. Rothan did not flinch. You'll be remembered, he said flatly. No, Arya replied. I'll be followed. The executioner stepped forward, his armor polished to ceremonial sheen. He carried no weapon, only a neural lance, thin and clinical. Painful. Designed for a slow death. She knew the Empire wouldn't permit a martyr, but neither could they stomach a quiet end. They would make her scream, and they would broadcast it. She braced as he knelt beside her. The lance ignited with a soft chime. It pressed to the base of her neck. The flash. Then nothing. Across the galaxy, on over 3,000 channels, her death played in real time. Her body jerked once, then collapsed forward, limp against the restraints. Her head lolled to the side. Her eyes, once fierce, were open and still. The last breath she took whispered from her lips as static cut in. The broadcast ended. And then silence. It took 27 minutes for the first system to fall. At precisely 3:14 Standard Galactic Time, the orbital array over the mining moon of Virex 7 suffered a complete systems failure. Moments later, the planet's surface communications ceased entirely. The Empire's monitoring stations logged this as a possible natural disaster. At 3:17, 4 more colonies blinked offline. Military probes dispatched returned only static. Internal networks showed 0 movement, 0 life. No signals. No defense alerts. No distress beacons. At 3:22, the Imperial Command Center on Corvex Prime was vaporized by what analysts would later estimate as a Class 7 antimatter detonation, though no vessel had breached orbit, and no warning had preceded the explosion. By 3:41, 27 minutes after the execution of Arya Vale, 82 Imperial worlds had gone dark. The skies above them were burning. Somewhere in deep space, hidden in the fracture between 2 uncharted systems, Commander Jace Talon watched the stars burn. He stood inside the hull of a ghost ship, the Vindicator, a vessel scrubbed from official records decades ago. Its dark frame pulsed with life again, powered by a core system Arya herself had helped build. It was part of the contingency, Phoenix Protocol. Jace clenched his jaw as he watched the feed roll in. World after world. Fire. Rebellion. Some fought with weapons. Some with information. Some with silence. She had planned it all. She knew she'd die, he said aloud, though no one responded. In the chair beside him, an old war droid stirred. It bore her insignia painted over one shoulder, and its voice box crackled as it powered up. She accepted the variables, the machine said. Her decision matrix calculated an 83% likelihood of execution. She's still engaged. Jace looked away from the screens and down at the datapad Arya had left him. A final message, sealed to unlock only upon her death. He tapped it open. Her voice came softly, less defiant than he remembered. Tired maybe, but unwavering. If you're seeing this, I'm gone. That was always part of it. But if you're seeing this, it means the plan is working. You need to finish it. There was a pause. A breath. I made them look at me when they did it. I hope you make them look at what comes next. The message ended. Jace sat in silence. Then he stood. He turned to the war droid. Activate all remaining units. Unleash the sleepers. Full override on planetary suppression codes. Begin Wave 2. Orders confirmed. The lights dimmed. The engines hummed louder. Outside the ship, dozens of stealth drones began to awaken, scattering into the void with silent trails of light. Back on Nova Haven, one of the few free cities left before the broadcast, a young girl stared up at the blank screen where Arya's execution had just played. Her parents wept beside her. She did not cry. Instead, she pressed her fingers to the glass, to the frozen image of Arya's face in the final second before her death. They'll come now, she whispered. She didn't know how she knew. But she did. Across the streets, murals of Arya began appearing. In black paint. In fire. On walls, on rooftops. Resistance cells activated. Former soldiers re-emerged from hiding. Entire city blocks shifted from bystanders to combatants. Somewhere deep within the Empire's own datanet, Arya's face had been encoded into their protocols. Her name became a command string. Her voice a key. Every node she had touched in her final year, every person, every AI, every spark she left behind, was waking up. Lord Marshal Rothan sat in his chamber, staring at a holomap filled with red alerts. The fires weren't spreading. They had already spread. Everything was falling simultaneously. He turned to his advisors. How? He asked, his voice a whisper now. How is this possible? None of them had answers. He replayed her execution. Paused it on the moment just before the lance struck. He zoomed into her eyes. She was smiling. From orbit above the ruin of a once imperial world, a resistance ship hovered in silence. Inside its command deck, an old soldier named Pharaoh, a man who had once served under Arya and abandoned her to save his family, watched the surface glow. He remembered the last word she said to him, "I forgive you, but history won't." And she was right. He closed his eyes and made the call. This is Captain Pharaoh of the Fireline. Let it be known, Arya Vale is dead. But in 27 minutes, she made gods bleed. The stars heard. And they answered. They called it the Ashfall. At first, the name belonged to the fall of Virex 7, whispered in panic across subspace frequencies and hastily scrawled in bunker walls. But as the fires spread, so did the term. The Ashfall was not an isolated catastrophe. It was systemic, deliberate, and coordinated with frightening precision. No one knew who was leading the counterstrike, but every Imperial officer began to fear the same thing, that this wasn't a rebellion. It was vengeance. On the fractured moon of Keldos, Imperial command bunkers had held for decades. Their garrison was composed of elites, Storm Marshal Battalion 47, equipped with next-gen combat suits and neural-linked targeting systems. They were precise, untouchable, until they weren't. At 4:02 Standard Time, every mech in the battalion fell into sudden diagnostic stasis. 17 seconds later, the oxygen filtration system in the main command dome reversed flow. 53 seconds after that, the dome shattered from within, crushed not by orbital bombardment, but by the pressurized implosion of its own security systems. There were no survivors. 54 such incidents followed in the next 2 hours, all executed without a trace of friendly fire or civilian casualties. The Phoenix Protocol wasn't just a contingency, it was a message written in fire and code. We are not broken. We are reborn. At the heart of the storm, Jace Talon watched it unfold with grim purpose. The command deck of the Vindicator pulsed with activity. No lights flashed red here, everything was cold, efficient. The AI spoke with calm calculation, each operation accounted for in nanoseconds. Jace wasn't listening to the AI. He was watching the names vanish off the galactic grid. Systems he'd memorized in strategy briefings were blinking out, one by one. Corvex, Duran's Hold, the Iron Ring, Lystra Prime. Names that once struck terror now simply vanished, consumed by coordinated insurrection and technological sabotage. And in the center of it all, a growing network pulsed with blue light, the Reborn Fleet. Jace ran a gloved hand through his hair, fatigue gnawing at the edge of his thoughts. He hadn't slept in over a day. Didn't dare. The moment he stopped, the grief might catch up. Arya's last words lingered like embers in his skull. He knew her death had been a spark, but even he had underestimated the inferno it would ignite. "Commander," the AI said, breaking his trance. "Incoming transmission. Resistance leader Talia Wren, secured channel. Patch her through." The screen flickered, then resolved into the face of a woman carved from war. Talia's jaw was set like iron, her cybernetic eye glowing softly, mapping him even now for stress, intention, weakness. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Jace, what's your next target?" He leaned forward. "The relay hubs. We hit the deep net routes, we cut the Empire's eyes." She nodded once. "Already ahead of you. I have 3 squads prepped for silent infiltration. We'll hit the comm nexus at Linera. I need cover." "I'll give you the fleet." "You'll give me the goddamn stars," she said and cut the feed. He didn't smile. He missed when they used to joke. Moments later, the Vindicator surged into motion, its silent engines gliding through fractured space. All around it, support cruisers joined formation, old Terran models, stripped and modified, bearing resistance flags or none at all. Their hulls were scarred, their weapons outdated. But they moved like predators. Meanwhile, across the system, hidden inside the remains of a derelict shipyard, a woman named Nara Vale watched the stars from beneath a welding mask. Her hands moved automatically, sealing a fresh charge line to a pulse cannon. Sweat trickled down her brow, unheeded. She hadn't spoken since the broadcast. Not since her sister died. Arya had been the hero. The general. The one people followed into hell. But Nara had always been the one who built the things that made it possible. The weapons, the codes, the viruses that chewed through Imperial firewalls like rot through fruit. Now, with Arya gone, Nara had nothing left but fury, and a command chain that placed her in control of the most dangerous AI ever constructed. She flicked her wrist, revealing a calm link. The voice that answered belonged to the AI housed in the core of the Vindicator. "Nah," it said. "You have activated the override. Awaiting directive. Deploy Protocol V," she said, voice low. "And lock out all Imperial encryption tiers. No more warnings. No more mercy." Confirmed. A pulse surged across the void. Protocol V wasn't a weapon. It was a virus. A language. A key. And every world the Empire had locked under its iron boot began to shake. Civilians received strange messages on their screens, flashes of Arya's face, snippets of her voice, echoes of her final breath. But more than that, access. Locked doors opened. Hidden caches appeared on their personal devices. Emergency ration networks activated. Defense drones began targeting the wrong uniforms. Revolution didn't need guns. It needed an invitation. And Arya had written it in her own blood. On the edge of the Lyrian expanse, a forgotten mining colony once starved by Imperial rationing burst into coordinated riot. Miners emerged in shock armor decades old, now reprogrammed with Phoenix overrides. They moved as one, like a machine. No orders. No delays. They had trained in secret. They had waited. And now they were fire made flesh. In orbit above them, a lone Imperial dreadnought attempted to initiate protocol lockdown. It never completed the command. An orbital rail spike, sent from a resistance stealth ship, pierced the bridge in silence. Within minutes, the Empire's orbital presence there was reduced to debris. The mining colony's banner rose, not in celebration, but in mourning. Aria's insignia, black on silver, fluttered in the vacuum. Back in the Empire's central command on Miroth, panic had taken root. Emergency meetings blurred into each other. Rothan hadn't slept either. His face sagged, his voice rasped, but his anger remained undimmed. "She's dead," he growled, slamming a fist on the table. "How are we still losing to a dead woman?" No one answered. Because they all feared the same thing. Aria hadn't died. She had multiplied. Each world that fell carried echoes of her tactics, her words, her designs. It was as if she had become an idea, and you cannot kill an idea. On the deck of the Vindicator, Jace stood beneath the stars as a final world flickered off the enemy's grid. Linera was burning now. He turned to his crew. "All nodes down." The technician nodded. "They're blind. They won't even see what comes next." Jace exhaled. "Then we move to the final phase." A moment passed before someone asked the question they were all thinking. "What about Rothan?" Jace's voice was quiet. "We're not done until he's ash." The deck fell into silent agreement. Below them, Linara's resistance fighters gathered in the streets. Flames licked the horizon. Children wore makeshift armor painted with Aria's colors. Old men picked up rifles they'd buried decades before. Across the planet, her name echoed not in sorrow, but in purpose. She had given them 27 minutes. They would give her forever. And as the final stars began to flicker beneath the weight of fire, the fleet turned toward the Empire's last stronghold. The heart of the machine still beat. But the blade was coming. The stars above Miroth looked the same as they always had, cold, vast, uncaring. But to Rothan, they had become suffocating. Each constellation once represented conquest, a reminder of the Empire's infinite reach. Now they looked like tombstones. He stood alone in the high command spire, staring through the reinforced glass wall at the defense fleet holding position above the planet. Rows of dreadnoughts, cruisers, and planetary disruptors floated like a fortress of steel and plasma. It should have made him feel invincible. It didn't. The loss of Linera had cracked something inside him. Not just another world, he'd lost plenty. No, this time, the silence that followed was louder than any rebellion. The Phoenix fleet had gone dark. Not vanished, no. They were waiting. And that was worse. "Sir," a voice came through the comm system, crisp and formal, but quivering at the edge. "Unidentified vessels have dropped from subspace at the perimeter. No IFF signals. Just silence." Rothan didn't respond immediately. He turned away from the stars. Let them come. Out beyond the fringe of Myratha's orbital defenses, reality split. Space itself peeled like skin, and through the wound emerged ships unlike anything in the Imperial Registry. Sleek, angular, wrapped in light-absorbing armor. No insignia. No designation. Only the shape of vengeance, drifting forward in absolute unity. At the head of the fleet flew the Vindicator. On its bridge, Jace Talon stood without ceremony. His uniform was scorched, his face worn, but his presence was ironclad. Around him, officers worked without speaking unless necessary. This was no longer a rebellion. It was a ritual. "Nara," he said calmly. Her voice replied instantly, cold and determined. "Payloads ready. AI systems synced. Phase execution in your hands. Begin orbital disarm." Below, Myratha's defense grid began to blink. At first, 1 or 2 turrets simply ceased targeting. Then entire batteries went offline. Alarm klaxons rang through the Imperial fleet as backup systems failed to respond. Internal software turned to gibberish. Command channels returned static. Then the Vindicator spoke. It wasn't Jace's voice, nor Nara's. It was Aria's, rebuilt, modulated, eternal. "You should not have shown them how to watch me die." The enemy didn't even get to fire. Phase 1, complete orbital disarmament, finished in under 6 minutes. Ships that once carried the Empire's pride now drifted powerless. The few that managed to maintain functionality found their targeting systems hijacked. Imperial dreadnoughts turned their cannons on each other without warning. Chaos bloomed. Inside the command spire, Rothan watched the screens flicker with failure. Officers screamed commands. Systems rebooted, failed, tried again. Still silence. He moved toward the override panel. Physical kill switches, built for paranoia, tested for failure. Manual mode, he barked. Now. But the panel did not respond. Then a soft click echoed through the chamber. A security door slid open. Rothan turned. Jace stood in the frame, flanked by 2 resistance operatives. Their weapons were lowered, but their postures screamed readiness. How? Rothan breathed. We were always inside, Jace said simply. We just waited for you to stop watching. Rothan laughed. A bitter, broken thing. You think this is victory? You're burning down civilization. We're burying rot, Jace answered, stepping forward. And planting something better. You sound just like her. Jace's face changed, not sorrow, not anger. Something deeper. Something final. I should. Rothan lunged, a small blade flashing from his sleeve. It moved fast. He was trained, lethal, practiced in executions. But Jace moved faster. He caught Rothan's wrist mid-strike and drove his fist into the man's chest. The blade clattered to the floor. The 2 soldiers behind Jace didn't flinch. This was not a duel. This was judgment. Rothan crumpled to the floor, wheezing, bleeding. End it, he spat, blood flecking his lips. Be the monster they think you are. Jace crouched beside him. We don't need to kill you. Rothan coughed a bitter laugh. Then you're weak. No, Jace said, rising. We're rebuilding. You get to watch. He nodded to the operatives. They dragged Rothan away, past the shattered screens and dead panels. Past a statue of the Emperor, now defaced with the Phoenix sigil. The flames outside were finally beginning to die. 2 days later, the entire galaxy watched again. Another broadcast. This time, no one was forced to see it. They chose to. The screen flickered to life, revealing Jace Talon standing at a podium. Behind him was the ruined command spire of Miroth, left as a monument to what had been. Beside him stood Talia Wren, arm in a sling, jaw tight but proud. Nara Vale, silent and armored in engineer's plating, her expression unreadable. And then the image of Arya appeared behind them, a hologram formed from memories and video fragments, her face calm, her voice clear. This is not the end, she said. It is the chance you were denied. Jace stepped forward. The Empire is gone. Its fleets are scattered. Its leaders face judgment. We will not repeat their sins. He paused. But we do not ask for your trust. Only your voice. A new network unfolded across the stars, one not bound by hierarchy or fear. Local systems began speaking to each other, unfiltered. Civilian councils formed. Aid flowed through open channels. It was imperfect, but it was real. Nara disappeared soon after. Some say she went to the Outer Rim, building something new with remnants of AI tech. Others believed she scattered Arya's code across the void, embedding her forever in the stars. Jace remained, reluctantly. He hated politics but knew the scars he carried mattered. People needed a face that had suffered and stood back up. And far beyond known space, a new fleet was being built, not for war, but for exploration. Because Arya had dreamed of stars not as weapons, but as homes. And they owed her that dream. In the black between galaxies, silence reigned once more. But in that silence, for the first time in generations, there was peace. And the Phoenix slept. Not dead. Waiting.